How many of you like watching HGTV? These are one of those TV networks that it's all about homes. It's all about, buying a home or buying and fixing a home. One of my favorite type of show is like shows that are fixer-uppers. People buy these things that are falling apart, and then they come in and they just make them look amazing. They may come in and they go, oh, okay, hey, we're going to knock down this wall. It's kind of been closed off, so let's do the open concept. Let's break down some walls. Maybe we'll rearrange some of the kitchen, items. And, hey, we're going to extend out this bathroom or closet. And they come in and, they put some paint on it. And before the end of the episode, they'd always make it look easy. It's like 30 minutes, right? And it's really been taking them like 6 weeks or 8 weeks to do all this. But it looks revitalized. It looks fresh. One of the common threads in these types of shows is that whoever is coming in, whoever the designer is, they have a heart for the house. They have a vision for the house that they're seeing. Sometimes people, when we look at something, we're like, I just don't see it. But then there are others who can step in and be like, oh no, I got this. We're just going to rearrange this. We're going to do that. We're a little paint here. We're going to put some, accents on this wall, change, and they just come in with this vision. And as they come in with this vision, they then come in with a team. And as this team comes in, they kind of say, hey, here's what you're in charge of. You're going to handle landscaping outside. We're going to get, new sod put in. We're going to get fresh plants. We're going to get painting on the outside. All right, inside team, you're coming in. We are demolishing the bathroom. And we're going to put in an amazing, shower with like 18 nozzles on it. And just like, it's like you're outside in the rain. And, they do all these incredible things. And by the end, this house looks awesome because they had a heart for the house, a vision for the house. My question for you today, if your house, your heart, what is your vision for your house? It could be you personally. It could be you as a family. What's your vision for your house? How are you taking care of your house? All of us at some point in life have probably had some moments where our house has gotten a little bit needy. There's been some areas maybe we've kind of ignored for a little bit, and it's like, I need to kind of take care of this area again. It may be a relationship. It may be a relationship with a kid. It may be a relationship with a spouse, or it may be some repair work needs to be done on your finances. Maybe there's some repair work that needs to be done on your mind and just kind of your thought processes and how you see the world and how you interact with other people, and just kind of a boost of self-confidence. Maybe there's some work that needs to be done on your own physical condition. Today we're looking at a story in the book of Nehemiah where God gave Nehemiah a heart for the house of Jerusalem. You see, Jerusalem had been in disrepair for a long time, and we'll get to that in just a moment on why. But Nehemiah was given the responsibility to restore what God had already given them as a people. Today, we're also going to talk and discuss something about CLA, how God has given us a heart for this house, and we need to take care of our house. We need to protect our house. We need to bless this house. Before we jump in, let me give you the background information of Nehemiah. The Israelites, they had been conquered and exiled into a different nation. At first, they had been conquered and they were exiled to Babylon. While they were in Babylon, Babylon got conquered. And then they were exiled to Persia. And during this season, this generations and generations that had been in a foreign nation, they kind of assimilated and adopted the practices of the others. And they kind of fell further and further away from the Lord. Their spiritual climate was a disaster. But there was still a few that loved the Lord. There were still a few that had a heart for the house. And in this instance, it was the house of Jerusalem. You see, their place of worship, their temple, it had been in shambles. And the walls of their city had been completely broken down. The gates had been burned down by their enemies. Speaking of walls, I don't know if any of you have recently taken a walk around this side of our church building. Let me show you our church building. I literally, between service, just went and picked this off. I didn't have to yank hard, nothing. Our church walls are in need of some help. And we want to have a heart for the house that God has given us. As we're talking about Nehemiah, let me give you a fun fact for the Bible nerds, if there's Bible nerds in here. All right, Nehemiah and Ezra, okay? Nehemiah and the book of Ezra in the Hebrew Bible were actually only one book. But then as they created it into English, expanded all that type of stuff, they split it up to be the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah. But here's what you need to know. Ezra and Nehemiah, those two books are describing 3 waves of exiles who were given permission to go back into Jerusalem and make it home once again. The first wave goes in, and they go in and they repair and rebuild the temple. The second wave kind of comes in, and they're kind of working on the spiritual condition of the people. And then the third wave is where Nehemiah comes in. Nehemiah comes in, and he has a heart for the walls around the city of Jerusalem. You know, this temple, over the years and years, when I say temple, now I'm talking about CLA, there's been a lot of amazing things that have happened in this place. I mean, if you were to think about how many people gave their heart to the Lord in this building? How many people's destinies, eternities were changed? How many kids and youth have walked through this place and been introduced to the Lord? How many people have been married in this building? How many people's families have been expanded and grown through the ministry of this place? God, over the years, has blessed CLA, and incredible things have been done already. Before I was here, some of the things that I know that had happened through the incredible leadership of Pastor Kevin and Misty is they built a brand new parking lot. I was told the parking lot was so bad that children would get lost in the parking lot. There was crevices, and they would fall into doom. They replaced roofs on the Commons area and Building C that were needed. They've done all kinds of updating and you know, just making this place more homey and whatnot and all of these things, and they did such a great job. But I want to tell you, there's still more to do. There's still more to do. In fact, one of my favorite upgrades that they did was over in the kids area. You walk into that place and it's just, bam. Your imagination just goes, yeah, this is super inviting for kids to come into. Back to Nehemiah. So he's in exile, but he is serving in the king's household. His brother returns from a trip from Jerusalem, and he tells him about the state and condition of the walls in Jerusalem. Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 3. They said to me, those who survive the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. Walls, in this context, were representing the spiritual condition of the city of Jerusalem. They had been broken spiritually because they had turned away from God. And as they had turned away from God, remember we've talked about this over the last few weeks, where the protection and the hand of God came off of them, and their enemies came in and conquered them and destroyed what God had given them. When Nehemiah had heard about this, his response is that he actually spends several days weeping and fasting and praying before the Lord. Church, I want to let you know that I have been seeking God on what to do about our walls, about what to do about some of the things that need work done on them. Over the course of many months, the board and I have had conversations about what should we do. Nehemiah, who had never lived in Jerusalem, but he still had a heart for God. And his heart for God gave him a heart for the house, which was the city of Jerusalem. And so he's praying to the Lord for direction on what he should do. Let's jump to Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you're not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. What you need to know is that Nehemiah was a cupbearer for the king. Oh, kids' church is making cups today. Cupbearer for the king. His job was to taste the food, make sure it wasn't poisoned, and then give it to the king. But that wasn't just his only job. His job was also kind of like a chief of staff. Think of it in that way. This would have been somebody who was kind of in charge of the household, in charge of the administration. And so he would have been a high-ranking official. And as he went in front of the king and he was just downcast and sad, and the king's like, what's going on, man? You don't look right. What's going on with you? And he responds. And this is what he says. I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? The king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to God of heaven, and I answered the king. If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it. Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked him, how long will your journey take? And when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. Filling in the stories here just for the sake of time, Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem with orders from the king. On his journey, he basically tells kind of the important people as he's going along, look, the king has sent me, and also he's also sent me, and you're supposed to give me resources to help do this. And so as he arrives in Jerusalem, then he takes a kind of a tour around Jerusalem. He's spending 3 days, and as he's spending there, he's kind of having conversations with people who he can tell, yeah, this is the right person I need to talk to about this. This is somebody who, has high integrity and character, and they love the Lord. They have a heart for the house. And then one night, he surveys the walls around the city. And as he comes back, he realizes this is in shambles. He gathered some men and he spoke to them. I want to tell you, over the last few months, for me personally, I have been gathering some people. I have been talking to our board and talking to pastors, talked to Pastor Kevin. I talked to pastors outside of here that I know and saying, hey, here's our situation. Here's what's going on. What do you think about this? Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 17. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. So why was this wall so important? Why did it matter so much that it was on Nehemiah's heart, that God had placed this on his heart, that he would have a heart for the house? What you need to understand for them as a people, their walls and their gates, as they had been broken and burned down, it represented the darkest time of their nation. Because they had turned from God, and as they had turned from God, his protection came off, and they had been conquered and defeated and exiled into foreign nations. So as people had come back to this nation, it was one of those where it's like, this is that constant reminder of our failure. This is our constant reminder of us turning away from God. Walls also represent protection You put walls around things that you want to protect. You put walls around things where you want to have a sense of security. You put walls around things because it also identifies with pride of ownership. For them, it was a sense of nationalism that, hey, we are the people of God and we are united, and this is the capital of our nation. This wall represented to the people around them that we care about this city and we will defend it. It was also a sign of confidence that, hey, we are the people of God. And this wall around this city was also a sign of their stewardship. You see, God had given them this land, and they needed to take care of it. They needed to do the best that they could with it. They needed to protect it. In our lives, there are some walls that need to get broken down. You probably have, over your course of a lifetime, have been working on breaking down some walls. Maybe some of those walls were walls of pride, or walls of addiction, or walls of prejudice, or walls involving toxic relationships. But there are other walls that need to be established in our life. Let me give you some examples here. These walls can be positive boundaries for us. These walls can be boundaries around our time. Do we have a wall or a positive boundary around our time? Do we spend time with our family? Is that a priority? Do we spend time with our spouse? Do we spend time with the Lord? Are we having a boundary around our time? Do we have a boundary around our finances? Or is it just kind of like, we do whatever, spend whatever, and we're always kind of short at the end of the month, and so we just get credit card debt and keep going? Or are you building a boundary around your finances? Are you building boundaries that preserve and protect your relationships? Are you building boundaries that preserve and protect your relationship with God? Are you building walls and boundaries that are for your health? Like, hey, I need to build this right over here because on the other side of that is all the things that are hurting me. And so I'm going to build this wall for my health. Maybe you have to build a wall for relationships. Like that relationship has been toxic and I need to build a wall around that. So now I'm not affected by that. Now I'm protected by that. Sometimes we need to build walls for our emotions. Maybe we've been hurt in the past and maybe we've got feelings and things happening in there, but we have to put some structures in place because people have been so negative to us or have hurt us so bad, and we have to say, okay, God, I'm going to shield myself now. I'm going to protect myself. Sometimes we build walls to protect our thoughts. In the scriptures, it says to take every thought captive. It's like creating a filter that people have to go through before their words can get to you. It's protecting you and shielding you. Nehemiah chapter 3. This whole chapter is basically about how Nehemiah divides up the work among the people. He basically says to some people, hey, you're going to go over here and you're going to work on this gate. You're going to go over here and you're going to work on this area of the wall. And you're going to go over here and work on this gate. There was a lot of gates. You're going to go over here, work on this wall. And he divided up the labor among them, so it didn't seem like it was impossible anymore. He had a plan of action in which he was to go after. There was a man by the name of Herman in Bruno, Nebraska. He had built a barn, and for whatever reason, he needed to move the location of his barn. It wasn't in the ideal spot. He thought, I'm going to have to tear this barn down, nail by nail, every piece of wood, and then rebuild this whole thing. He was frustrated by the amount of work that it was going to require to do this, and he started talking to some of his neighbors, and one of his neighbors had an idea, and they said, hey, what if we put a hydraulic lift underneath the barn, and we lift it in the air? And he's like, okay, well, what does that do? He's like, now, what if we get a lot of people and we pick that barn up and we walk it over to where you want to go? Well, Herman's starting to think about this and go, That sounds a whole lot faster than rebuilding this whole thing. The barn weighed 16,000 pounds. This is a lot of work. So Herman goes and talks to every neighbor he can find, every friend and family member. He reaches out to them and says, hey, on this day, I need your help. We're going to pick up this barn. 328 of his neighbors and friends and family came over to pick up this barn. The hydraulic jack had lifted it up in the air already, and so now they all find a different spot inside the barn, outside the barn, and as they pick it up, and somebody's like, 1, 2, 3, go! And it kind of looks like ants, like carrying something really heavy, and they're like, 328 people carried this barn 110 feet to its new location. Now, if you're good with math and you did that real quick, 16,000 divided by 328, it's roughly 49 pounds a person. You see, when you divide the work and the load amongst a lot of people, it actually becomes a lot more manageable. Now, some of the people there, they probably were carrying more than their share. Maybe some of the other people were carrying less. Maybe they're younger, they're smaller or whatnot. And so, but collectively, they were able to carry this thing that was 16,000 pounds, 110 feet. When we work together, things become more manageable. God's work is done in the same way. When each person does what they can, the work can be carried out properly, quickly, and completely. Nehemiah, as he is now kind of rallied the troops and said, hey, here's what's going on. This is what we need to do. You're working here, here, and here. Well, some opposition came. Opposition came from different areas, and they're saying, no, you're not going to do this. Hey, we're going to come conquer you. And so now his troops are kind of getting discouraged, and so he's trying to motivate them and say, hey, we can do this. We can do this. Don't get discouraged. And he used the opposition to actually motivate them and make them even more determined than they originally were to finish quickly. Nehemiah 4, verse 16. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. When you're trying to rebuild some positive things in your life, you might face some opposition from others. Some people who don't want to respect those new walls and boundaries that you've put in place. And so sometimes when that happens, you may have to establish and make known your mission to them. No, I'm doing this for my health, or I'm doing this because I need to spend more time with my family, or I'm doing this because I need to get my finances in order. Sometimes you gotta make your mission known to others. And as you make your mission known, you may even have people who join you in your effort. Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about it, but our mission as a church is to love God, love people, and love people to God. Many years ago, Jessica and I bought our first house after the Great Recession. How many of you are still trying to forget that? It was a hard time in our nation. House values were basically cut in half. Well, we were young at that point. We didn't have a house yet, and so God had just kind of positioned us in such a time that, hey, when these values were cut in half, that was actually the time that we started to look for a house. And we looked at over 100 homes because the market had been flooded by people who had lost their homes. And as we started looking in these homes, and it was crazy, some of the things that we were seeing. A lot of people were angry about what had happened. And so they are smashing toilets. They are ripping cabinets off the wall. They're doing anything and everything that they could to just make it harder for whoever was going to come in. Well, we had looked at so many houses and we didn't know okay, what's going to happen. And One day our realtor calls us up and he's like, do you remember this house? And we're like, nope. He's like, I think if you put an offer in on this one, I think you got a good chance. Okay. So we put in an offer on this house. When we went to look at the house, again, the entire front yard and backyard had been ripped up. I kid you not, every single sprinkler had been removed. Every single plant had been ripped out of the ground. Every single tree had been ripped out of the ground. In fact, they even ripped the garage door openers out of the garage. The house needed some work. And when we went in and we saw, like, man, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. But my wife and I, we started to have a heart for the house. All of a sudden, where we saw, hey, there's some challenges, there's some, some things here that, yeah, but with some tough work, we can make this place a home. So we bought this house. Now, it's one thing just to buy a house and just to live in it and maintain it, but it's another thing to step into something and want to improve it and make it better and make it last. And so when we stepped into this house, we painted the entire inside of the house twice in the time that we lived there. We replaced the entire flooring of the downstairs because it had been nasty. We rearranged some of the rooms. We moved the dining room to be in a different place so we could have a bigger family room. We rearranged the order of our kitchen and moved the island and whatnot. We painted or stained every single cabinet in that house. We put new hardware on every single cabinet, new doorknobs on every single door in that house. We worked all over that place. We planted a front yard, planted grass, ran sprinkler lines, put in sprinklers, planted shrubs and trees and whatnot. And we did all of these things. And was it a lot of work? Yep. But we had a heart for the house. And so what we saw as hard work was actually just investing back into what God had given us. We as a family, we have a mission as a family. Hey, we want to create a place that people want to be involved with, come over to. We want to have a place where we can raise our kids. But we also wanted to have a house that was ready and prepared for ministry to take place. 7 days after we moved in, we had winter camp in my house for 30 plus teenagers. Now you're like, how did you do that? Well, we had just moved from a 1-bedroom apartment. We had no furniture. All the bedrooms were empty except ours. So we put all the girls upstairs, sleeping bags on the floor, all the boys downstairs, sleeping bags on the floor. We held services in that house. People were blessed in that house. Now, the area that we had lived in, it was very impoverished, and so there was not like, hey, we could raise a lot of money to go to camp and whatnot. So it was like we needed to make camp affordable, and it cost $25. That covered the cost of food for these kids to come stay at our house for 2 nights. We did it again for 3 years. We also did some summer camps in our house. We held discipleship groups in our house. We held life groups for adults in our house. You see, we wanted our house to be a reflection of who we are and our love for God, and we wanted our house to be a place of ministry. You see, God had given us a heart for that house. I stand here today as your pastor, and I say I have a heart for this house called CLA. God has given us some opportunity to take strides forward. Back to the story of Nehemiah 6, verse 15 and 16. So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. When all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. The wall around Jerusalem had been destroyed for 140 years, and they rebuilt it in 52 days because they had a heart for the house. I want to take a pause right here and just pray over you before I present what God has put before us. If you wouldn't mind just closing your eyes. God, if there's anybody here that maybe there's an area in their life that they need to build a positive wall, a positive boundary around, God, I pray that you give them the strength, the resources, the wisdom, God, on how to do that. God, I pray that they would get priorities in line, Lord, that starting with you, and then everything would come in alignment with that. Lord, we pray over the families represented here, the finances, the health represented here, the thoughts that are represented here, God, that you would just speak to people, God, and allow them to institute and build up those things, Lord, to protect, to defend, God, what you have given them. God, and I also take a moment because there may be somebody here who's never established you as their firm foundation. And God, if there's anybody here that needs to do that today, God, I pray that just right now in their heart they would say, Jesus, you are my cornerstone, and I'm going to build my life on you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Church, today, we're going to talk about a church revitalization project for CLA. I've already alluded to it a few times already, but our walls need some attention. We're going to put up here on the screen some pictures of our walls. Now, a few months ago, when I became your pastor, one of the first things that we actually had happen is I was told by a staff member, hey, we need to get somebody to come check these walls out. And so we did, and they came out and they said, hey, you're going to make it through winter. I don't think they knew the kind of winter that we were going to have. You probably didn't either. I've never lived in a place where winter went from October to May. After winter was getting close to an end, so I thought, I asked for the person to come back, and I said, hey, can you come tell us, like, where are we at in this process? Like, because we just had a brutal winter. Like, what is it looking like? And they're like, yeah, you guys are going to need to do something about this. You're not going to make it another winter, especially not another winter like that. So as you can see, I don't even know how to describe it. Look how far my hand can go into the wall. Let's show the next picture. Show another one. Yep, it's peeling off in different places, bubbled up. And let's pause right here on this one. This is over by our kids' entrance. Now, most of us, we don't ever really go on this side of the building, and so you probably haven't seen that. But that's all the real bad stuff is on this side of the building. But now it's starting to happen on other sides of the building. And when I was walking around the property and I saw that was at our kids' entrance, I was like, no! I want when families come onto this place that they go like, hey, there's a pride of ownership here. I want people to see this and go like, yeah, like they did awesome. I want what's going on the inside of that place, because it's awesome, to also be reflected on the outside. So as we had somebody come and take a look at our walls, they noticed something unusual, and they said, you know what, I think we need to get a roofer out here around your auditorium because it looks weird under your eaves. And he's like, I don't know that we should come out here and do this work, and then it all kind of falls apart again. Well, a roofer came out, and on top of our roof, we've got little holes. We have a foam roof on top, and basically what has happened is that birds have come along, and they have figured out that if they hit that thing long enough with their beak, they can actually rip the foam out and build nests with it. And so we've got about 40 holes on top of our roof in this building. And because of that, in this crazy winter, water, moisture, everything kind of was soaking through. Let's go to the next picture here. This is right outside the doors, right over here. In fact, that's the piece that I just ripped off. Let's go to the next one. So these holes in our roof have led to issues in our building. So I'm here today to introduce to you a church revitalizing project. We want to preserve what God has given us, because there was people long before you and I. In fact, there may even be some people who were here who were original members of CLA that had a vision for this place, that took huge steps of faith in building this building. And we want to honor their steps of faith and take steps of faith of our own. People, again, took huge steps of faith when they built that kids building over there. We want to honor and preserve what God has given us, but we also want to improve it for the next generation beyond us. We want to show our community around us a pride of ownership that when people drive by, they go like, wow, they care. We want to make our property safe and secure. Listen, part of this is just about preventing further damage. This is about preventing things like mold happening. We want this place to be safe and secure for you and I and your children. We want this place to be healthy. We want to steward what God has given us, not just for us, but so that it lasts beyond us. We want our property to be inviting to our community. We want when people pull up to this place that they go like, wow. That same effect that we get when we take kids over to the kids area, I want that as people step onto this property, because it draws people in. And as people get drawn in, it's not just so, hey, we can get more butts in the chairs, okay? That's not what it's about. It's about so we can get more people into heaven. It's about to spread the gospel to more people. But we have to preserve and improve what God has given us. In a few minutes, when we're done here, we're going to have a church membership meeting, and we're going to take a vote on improving and repairing what we have been entrusted to as a church. I'll share the specific details, the numbers, the cost of things that we're looking at. But here's the gist of it. For us to be able to do this, we're going to have to take out a church loan. And it's one of those situations where it's like, we really need to do this because we're not going to make it through another winter in some of these areas. So here's